Welcome in. It's Wednesday. It's August 21st. It is In Touch with Indiana Sports, powered by HoosierIllustrated.com. No matter what time of day you're listening to this, watching to this, welcome in. Whether you're having a cup of coffee, a spot of tea maybe, or maybe you're cracking open a cold one after a hard days of work. Welcome in. Get comfy, because for the next close to an hour, you're going to enjoy some In Touch with Indiana Sports. We're going to dive into a little bit of Indiana football with Shannon Griffith. Very thankful for him taking the time to come on with me, as always. He was one of my first guests back when we kicked this thing off a few weeks ago. He's revisiting to help us get more acclimated with this Indiana football team as they prepare for their opening week matchup with FIU, now only 10 days away. And on the other side of things, basketball, we finally have the Battle for Atlantis matchups that I have been looking forward to seeing for the last few weeks. We've been talking about Indiana's schedule and just the potential for who they might be playing. Because, I mean, this is, outside of the South Carolina game, this is their one big opportunity in the non-conference to get some marquee victories. And we'll dive into that here. Do we want to do it now, or do I want to let you sit on it for a little bit? I know with the internet, you guys can look it up whenever you want and just check it out for yourselves. And there's a good chance you already have, considering I'm recording this after it's already been released. And a good chunk of today's episode is football related. So maybe you know what? I'm going to go ahead and give the people what they want. I don't want you to tune out. I don't want you to skip ahead. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to talk a little bit about this Battle for Atlantis before I bring in our man, Shannon Griffith, who, again, or as I said earlier, very gracious with his time today, and appreciate him as always. But let's go ahead and dive into these Battle for Atlantis matchups. Or I should talk about it by giving it its official name, the Bad Boy Mowers Battle for Atlantis. Man, who doesn't want to play in an event sponsored by a company called Bad Boy Mowers? There's also the Bad Boy Mowers Gasparilla Bowl in football. Maybe Indiana will play in that this year. I'm just being silly. But yeah, the Bad Boy Mowers Battle for Atlantis, which will take place November 27th through the 29th, Thanksgiving weekend, for those who are aware of that. Very good holiday hoopsgiving matchups, tournament, MTE, whatever you want to call it. But here's what we got going down. Again, before I reveal the matchups, if you have kept it a secret for yourself and you're waiting for the one, the only John Alden of In Touch with Indiana Sports to give you these matchups. Real quick, here are the teams. We have Louisville, West Virginia, Oklahoma, Davidson, Arizona, Providence, Gonzaga, and the one, the only Indiana Hoosiers. So who's Indiana playing? What's their road to a Battle for Atlantis championship, if you will? Well, I'll tell you what, I'm very excited for the first game just because the matchup hits close to home, literally. It is Indiana versus Louisville to kick off the entire Battle for Atlantis. And I'm excited for this matchup. I mean, just mainly for the personal reasons. I don't know how many people throughout the state of Indiana really enjoy watching Louisville basketball. And not that I enjoy Louisville, but I've been around it my entire life. It's technically my day job. I do a radio show. I produce a radio show, I should say, in the afternoons for a Louisville themed, U of L themed sports show. So I'm very familiar with all of the struggles that the Louisville Cardinals basketball program has gone through over the past couple of years. I mean, the Kenny Payne era was one of the most horrendous things I've ever seen. And they're going to trot in an entirely different basketball team to face Indiana down in the Bahamas when Pat Kelsey, new head coach Pat Kelsey, formerly of College of Charleston, brings his new Louisville Cardinals squad. Again, they have all new guys. There's not a single player from last year's Louisville team that's on this team. So whatever you think you remember about Louisville when Indiana played them in Madison Square Garden last year, out the window. None of that matters. And that game was a lot closer than it should have been. That Louisville team won 8 games. Indiana nearly lost and gave them a 9th win. But with that being said, I'm excited for that matchup. One name that Indiana fans will be familiar with whenever they face this Louisville team is Chucky Hepburn, formerly of Wisconsin. He is likely to play an integral role for Louisville's team this year. And they're going to play a very high-powered offensive style. Pat Kelsey teams are, honestly, it's a lot like what Indiana fans have been clamoring to have. So, I mean, if things don't go Indiana's way here and Louisville wins, the fans could be loud. I'll just say that. People will be upset potentially because Pat Kelsey plays a very 3-point oriented style of basketball when it comes to offense. There's been times where he plays 5 guys out. I don't know if he's going to be able to do that against Indiana, considering how big of a team Indiana is. But Pat Kelsey teams shoot the 3 and they usually shoot it well. So Indiana's going to have to be on their defensive best whenever they face Louisville in the first round of the Battle for Atlantis, and I'm very excited. The second matchup, so Indiana, depending on whether they win this game or not, they will play one of 2 teams in the second round, either West Virginia or Gonzaga. So again, you don't really know who they're going to play because we don't know if Indiana is going to win or lose first. But if we're predicting things to go chalk the way they should go, if Indiana beats Louisville, then they will play Gonzaga in the second round of the Battle for Atlantis, which is what you hope for because that would give you a marquee matchup. And Louisville may end up being a good team. That I'm not saying Louisville isn't a marquee matchup from a ranking standpoint. They're just a big unknown. They're something that we haven't seen before. We haven't seen how they did have some games played in the Bahamas similar to what Indiana did in the first year of Mike Woodson, some exhibitions that they did very well in. But again, there's not a whole lot to really take from that. So Louisville's a very big unknown on how good they're going to be. So whether or not it will be considered a marquee win, that remains to be seen. I do think it'll be a difficult game for Indiana, but we'll see. So anyway, Gonzaga, that'll be your second game if you win and things go chalk. So that's something that gives you 2 opportunities for good wins to get things rolling. And then on the other side of the bracket, you will eventually play one of the 4, Oklahoma, Providence, Davidson, and Arizona. And Providence and Arizona likely to be the highest rated teams on that side of the bracket when you think about preseason projections and things like that. So if Indiana gets to play all of the marquee opponents that they want, obviously you automatically get Louisville, but you'd want to play Gonzaga and Arizona after that. And if you win all 3, then you're in business. Here's the thing. The great thing about the MTEs, whether it be this or the Maui Invitational or one of the other ones, the 2K Classic, I don't even think they call it the 2K Classic anymore. I think they call it, there's a whole bunch of different ones that have rotating sponsors and that type of thing. But winning these MTEs, the multi-team events, where you play 3 games on back-to-back days, if you can win all of those games, you're likely to find yourself in the top 10 of the AP poll or any top 25 poll after you win those events, just because you play so many good teams on back-to-back nights. It's a great way to boost your resume. It's also a great way to completely tarnish your resume if you lay an egg in one of these tournaments. So very important week for Indiana from November 27th through 29th. I'm excited that they finally announced these matchups, and I'm also very excited that Indiana will face Louisville in week 1, or game 1, I should say. So let me know your thoughts on this. I do genuinely want to know. Leave a comment on YouTube or leave a message on the hotline 502-830-9195. Let me know what you think about these matchups for the Battle for Atlantis and what you think Indiana might do. I think Indiana needs to at least win 2 of 3 here. Anything less than that will be seen as a disappointment, more than likely. Not even more than likely. You mean, if Indiana is going to be a player in the national conversation at any point this season, which I believe they have the roster to do so, you got to win at least 2 of 3. You don't have to win the entire thing, but win 2 of 3. And you really kind of want to win the first one, I feel like, for sure, because the caliber of opponent you'll face if you lose the first game won't be nearly as good as the caliber opponent you'll face after that, obviously. So very important week at that point of the season for Indiana. So yeah, leave a message. Let me know what you think Indiana, or first of all, let me know if you're pleased with the draw of Louisville, and let me know what you think about their potential path to winning the battle for Atlantis. If you think it's possible, what you expect them to do record-wise, 1 of 2, or 1-2, 2-1, 3-0, maybe even 0-3. Maybe you're someone who's very pessimistic about the team, and that's fine. Just let me. I do want to know your thoughts, whether it be on the hotline or in the YouTube comments, because this will definitely be a talking point as we get closer to the season. So there you have it. I'm glad that I don't have to sit there and wonder when this is going to be released. Once I saw that the Maui Invitational was putting their lineup, I think they released theirs yesterday, I immediately went over to the Battle for Atlantis Twitter, and they put a post out that was a GIF of like someone rocking kind of looked like a hypnosis thing, but it said something about time is ticking or whatever. I don't remember what it said. I'm sure that's incorrect in some way, shape, or form. But either way, they mentioned that it was going to be the bracket was going to be released today, and thankfully it happened before I finished recording the show, because I was initially planning on just mentioning that it was going to be released today, and I'm glad it happened during the recording and not after the fact. But either way, we're here, we're excited, and that's about it when it comes to basketball news right now. So without further ado, we're going to get back into a little bit of football talk. Going to bring in our man, Shannon Griffith from Hoosier Tailgate, talking a little bit about expectations for Indiana football as always. Finally getting to the end of talking season. And one thing we also do about halfway through the interview, we talk a little bit about some of the new things that are being implemented in college football this year with the new technology, rule changes, that type of thing. So we dive into all of that here, and I'm going to go ahead and let that roll right now. Joining me now is the one, the only Coach Shannon Griffith at Coach Griff55 on Twitter. Welcome in. Happy Wednesday, my friend.
Yeah, it's nice to be at hump day, as they would say.
That's right. The old cliche, hump day. And we're now 10 days away from Indiana football coming back.
I know. It's amazing that the summer has gone as quick as it's gone. It seems like it was just May, and we were in your neck of the woods. We're getting ready for the Derby, and now all of a sudden we're 10 days away from college football, Indiana football, and like I told you,
and even less than that if you include the week 0 slate that's coming up this Saturday.
Yeah, and high school football in the state of Indiana starts Friday night.
And that's definitely part of what you partake in annually, and I know that's important to you. But what are you looking forward to most about the high school season before we dive into Indiana football?
Oh, I don't know. Starter football for me, regardless of whether it's high school football, college football, in that regard, this is the time that will take you from August basically to Thanksgiving. I mean, that's usually the way I look at it. So every week that you have something to look forward to on a Saturday or Friday, and it's like Christmas for me, I guess you would say.
It does. For college sports fans in general, whether you're primarily a college basketball fan, college football fan, it's kind of it truly is the unofficial start to the year. Some people, if they're that into college sports, maybe they consider their actual calendar year to begin at the end of August as opposed to January 1st, like the normal people in humanity. But
yeah, absolutely.
Nonetheless, Indiana kicks off things against FIU 10 days from now at home to kick off the Signetti era officially. Finally, all of this talk we'll have some action to go along with it. What are, I guess, kind of your initial impressions from the first few weeks of fall camp? Last time you and I chatted was right after Big Ten football media days. I'm not 100% sure how much you've been able to keep up with. I'm sure you've seen some of the things that Signetti has said in some pressers. What's kind of your overall vibe surrounding what's been going on with the Hoosiers the last few weeks?
Well, I think you get a pretty good, honest assessment from Coach Signetti. I mean, he's too much of a veteran to sit up there and BS the audience, so to speak, because he doesn't like wasting time. And so I think you get a pretty good, fair assessment. I think he likes where they're at. By no means are they a finished product. He knows that losing Kidwell hurt their offensive line, but they feel like they have some adequate backups now that they can rely upon. They may be lacking game experience, but, those kids are ready to go. But I do feel like, overall, I think he likes where they're at in terms of progression. And he's one of those guys that it's never perfect for. And he always looks at it that there's always something that they have to do better, because he realizes to be perfect is not human. There's nobody that's perfect. So he's one of those guys that always is striving to achieve it, knowing that it's never going to be in reach. So he utilizes that as a way to say, it doesn't matter what you did today. If you don't come back and get a little bit better tomorrow, you've lost what you've earned up to that point.
Yeah, he's used the phrase a few times that you never arrive. And a lot of people apply that to their daily lives, no matter what it may be. It's a good way to kind of, I guess, keep your head in check, never get too high or too low on yourself, as you mentioned. And that's going to be key for this Indiana football team in year one, because one thing we've seen, especially with some of the Tom Allen-led teams, it's possible to get too high. And then once you finally reach that plateau of what that high is, you can stumble very quickly. It can be very hard to pick yourself back up. And really, after the first two games, when Indiana faces FIU in Western Illinois, we're already going to have our initial thoughts on maybe what the true goals for this team may be, even though it'll be a very small sample size and against competition that really isn't going to be anything comparable to what you'll face the rest of the season. But we'll still have our opinions. And then by the time you head into week 3, you'll really have to put them to the test for the first time when you head to the road, I should say, against UCLA. And that's where you'll really get the first sense of where this team could be heading into the rest of the fall.
Right. And I think I've heard him say a phrase that I used when I was coaching: you're either getting better or you're getting worse. You never remain the same. And that's one of the other things that he uses. So when you look at the schedule that they've got in front of them, and you have 8 home games, your first 2 at home before you go on the road for your first Big Ten game. The one game out of those 3 that gives me pause, and I think will give us a pretty good sampling, is FIU. They're going to be a team that Indiana's going to be favored by at least 3 touchdowns.
Yep.
I think, in my own personal opinion, it'll be closer than that, because FIU's got a very good offense and a veteran offensive coordinator in David Yost, who spent many years at Missouri with Gary Pinkel and led great offenses there. But, that game will be a big, big test for this ball club, because first games are always the ones that you worry about. And you've got an FIU team that's coming in that will have a chip on their shoulder, and they've got a quarterback who's returning, and he played as a true freshman, and he's a dynamite quarterback. So the defense is going to be challenged, the offense will be challenged, and they're going to play a team that, by all practical means, Indiana on paper is a 3 touchdown favorite. And I just don't think it's going to be that. I think it's going to be a dogfight. And the longer they
and I don't mean to interrupt, but that may upset some fans. And not that, and I think you're very level-headed with what you're saying. I think that it very well could play out that way. But when you come in with all of this talk and expectation, and maybe it's more so for the entertainment side of things, as Signetti has mentioned, for the fans that maybe don't look at things as closely or look at their opponent as closely as others might, it may be difficult for some fans to swallow, like, hey, I thought we were going to be a totally new type of team, and be able to blow this team out of the water. Well,
and I think part of that, from my perspective, is the coach in me that always is more cautious than I am boisterous in that regard. But I just know, coaching at that level, when I was at Ball State and we had the opportunity to go play a Big Ten team, it was always a huge motivating factor for that team. And, we went to Minnesota one year and gave them a dogfight, and they were supposed to be, quote unquote, a middle pack or upper middle pack Big Ten team, and they beat us on a last second play.
And
So,
especially in week one, I've heard Colin Cowherd say this before, and he's usually referring to the NFL when he says this, but I think it applies to pretty much anything. Bad teams don't know they're bad in week one. They really don't even know they're bad in the first couple of weeks. You can look at Indiana a couple of years ago when they went to Iowa and they were coming off the big season. They only win 2 games that year. They face Cincinnati. They go toe-to-toe with Cincinnati. They're up 14-0. And before the Micah McFadden play where he got thrown out, they're looking like they could win that game. And that's the Cincinnati team, if I'm not mistaken, that went to the college football playoff. Yep. So bad teams, in the grand scheme of things, don't know they're going to be bad this early in the season.
Yeah,
they're going to play with a chip on their shoulder.
And that's the thing that I think is a very true assessment, that, even for a team like Indiana, where the optimism is at its all-time high, and that's to be expected when you have a new coaching staff. He preaches a different brand of football, mentally, physically, and then he utilizes it outwardly. The hype is there. Now, the talk is over, and you have to go out and show what you have as a product on the field. And I agree with you. If they are in a dogfight and they let an FIU team hang around, there's going to be a lot of frowns on people's faces walking out.
You'll hear the same old Indiana. That's the kind of old adage that people go back to.
And that's what I try to at least express outwardly from a perspective of being a college coach, that they're not going to be perfect week one. And, coming in with this mentality that they're going to be a 3-touchdown favorite just because it's a new staff and so forth and so on is not in some respects, a realistic proposition, because we're going into week one. Now, with that being said, I do believe that they are on the right schedule. I do believe that Coach Cignetti is the right man to put his fingerprint and his, everything about him and program-wise on display, because I do think he is the right fit at the right time. And, the people that are around the program are pretty realistic when they say that they have a different vibe and a different feel. I do think that's genuine. Yeah. I do think some of it, though, is also because the outlook is different, because you have somebody new leading the program in that regard. Remember, Tom Allen was 6 points or less in 6 games from, instead of being fired, to being
like 7-5. I think they had 4 or 5 one-score games last year.
Yeah, and now does that mean that a guy like Cignetti is the difference in that? Maybe, but we're going to find out real quick. I do like Curtis Rourke. I do think he's the guy that can lead it. I do like the progress of Taven Jackson. I still think that he is a big-time type of quarterback that can ultimately be a big-time quarterback in the Big Ten with the time and progression that he needs in practice and reps and things of that magnitude.
And one thing, speaking on that specifically, Cignetti said it's important to stick with guys for an entire season. So I do think that's almost a confirmation that whoever trots out in that starting position, as it is supposed to be, or it seems like it's going to be Curtis Rourke, I do believe, unless there's an injury, he's going to be who Cignetti sticks with for the entirety of the season. I mean, I don't want to say that 100%, because obviously I'm not a coach and I don't know what goes on in the day in and day outs. But with him saying that it's important to stick to it, it's definitely a change in tune from what we've, especially when you look at last season. Tom Allen flat out said he's going to use the first couple of games to kind of see where both of his top 2 quarterbacks were at. We're not going to see any of that this year, I don't think.
Yeah. No, and I think what you see from Cignetti is that, they're gonna live and die by what Curtis Rourke can or can't do at quarterback. That doesn't mean Taven Jackson will not play if Curtis Rourke is having a bad day, but there's not going to be a quarterback controversy. Irregardless of what happens on a Saturday, win, lose, or draw, Curtis Rourke will be the starting quarterback the next week trotting out on the field. And that's Cignetti from the perspective of coaching the position, playing in that position and understanding that when you start playing mind games with kids, it really has a lot to do with their confidence. And if you destroy it because you're not decisive in your decision, you're not going to get the play that you want at that position.
Yeah, that's interesting to think about because we haven't seen that in Indiana the last couple of years, and I'm just ready to see all of this stuff play out on the field.
Mm-hmm.
I'm tired of talking about it. I mean, I like talking about it, but I'm tired of the speculation of everything because for this program in particular, everything's brand new, and it's been since December 1st that we've talked about the what ifs for this Indiana football program. The moment that Cignetti was the guy for Indiana, it seemed like there was a shift in just the type of attitude that's been around. And it's, I mean, so what's that been? Close to 8 months of just wondering what this new type of football team will look like as they take the field against FIU. So it'll be interesting to see. Who do you think will be the X factor for this Indiana football team this year? Maybe both sides of the ball if you have an answer for offense and defense.
Well, in the college football era, and especially in the Big Ten era, you go as your quarterback goes. So if Curtis Rourke can be the type of player that everyone thinks he can be, including the coaches there, Cignetti and Shanahan and Tino, I mean, that's going to be the biggest thing is, they'll go as much as he goes. They've got the people around him, wide receiver, running back, to really aid him as a performer. It's just, can he make the right decisions with the football, throwing it, get him in and out of plays that, bad plays to good plays. So that'll be a component. The X factor, I think, with Indiana offensively will always be the offensive line. Is the offensive line going to be a Big Ten caliber offensive line that can protect the quarterback, but ultimately open up running lanes for the running backs they have? That's going to be the X factor there. Defensively, it's going to be, can their defense make the big stop when they need them? That was what hurt Indiana and has hurt Indiana over numerous years, is that when the defense needs to make that stop in a game, they've not made it. And it's led to their losses, their demise, losing those games by a score or less, or a point or less. It's because they couldn't get their defense off the field. And so that, to me, is going to be the big question mark. Can that defense rise up when needed and depended upon to get off the field and make the stops that they need to make to win ball games?
And with the defense specifically, even the short sample size from what we've heard of Aiden Fisher when he's spoken with the media, whether it be Big Ten Media Days or with the player Q&As on campus, he seems like he's that bona fide defensive leader that Indiana's been lacking really since they lost Micah McFadden, which has only been a few years. Yep. But to have somebody with that type of confidence, that's definitely something that I think Indiana fans can look forward to, whenever you're hoping to take that leap as a defensive unit.
Well, that and the fact that him and Aiden and Walker have been together as a duo. They played together at JMU. When I talked to Brian Haynes prior to camp starting, he really liked the fact that they shored up the defensive line. They were still short in their depth, though. So that, I know, is a concern at some of their positions. They're short in depth, where they're going to have to hope that a young guy that they've recruited comes in and does enough to be that backup that they need. And then I think the biggest question, too, defensively outside of the defensive line is the secondary. Now, Pons provides them a guy that can be that shutdown corner, that you can take a player out of a game and worry about the 10 other positions. But I think that still remains to be seen, is, do they have the guys in place in the secondary to be a good pass defense team, as well as are they able to go man to man, because they like to do the blitz stuff.
We'll see. One more thing before we wrap things up here, Coach.
We got to keep talking. Come on now. We can't be just stopping things in the middle of the road.
This is it's almost like an earworm, or if there's a term for an earworm that is more about a thought that keeps popping into your head, even though it's unrelated to what you're talking about, this is what that is. So I'll go ahead and just get that out of the way so I can just erase it from my brain. But did you see yesterday the QR code helmets that Oklahoma State is going to be really showcasing, if you will, for their team this year?
I did not. I will have to look that up because my day job, of course, I had meetings most of the day, so I didn't really get a chance to follow up on anything outside of Indiana football, let's say.
So Oklahoma State, I believe it's just their program. There may be more that I'm unaware of, but this is what I saw yesterday. So they're going to have QR codes in some way, shape, or form attached to their helmets. And I guess it's kind of a good idea, but at the same time, I don't really see how effective it's actually going to be, because you're going to be relying on really tight camera shots from whatever broadcast team, ESPN, Fox, whatever it may be. You're going to be relying on those shots, and they're not going to be intentionally pointing their cameras up against the QR codes, right? I mean, that just seems like that would be, a form of, I don't want to say something illegal, but it just seems like why would they show preference to the team with the QR codes, if that makes sense?
Well, yeah, I'm not even sure what is going to be in the QR code. I would imagine what they're doing, and this is just speculation, is it probably is a link to that kid's bio that provides, his height, his weight, where he's from, things of that nature, which I think would be pretty cool, even if they could somehow, some way utilize it in the stadium, where people could look at, with their cameras, where a camera could be put on a particular individual that would give that information rather than trying to look it up. I mean, that's a unique way of thinking of it. I doubt it's going to be some type of commercial or some type of NIL thing. Because
it is. So maybe something I haven't mentioned. So it's supposed to take, so depending on who the player is, the QR code is supposed to link you directly to whoever that player is, to their specific NIL, I guess donation page, if that makes sense.
Well, then you got a problem with TV. Because the TV will, Fox or ESPN is not going to have free commercials for kids' NIL, I guess. But hey, we're in a day and age now where technology is advancing pretty quickly, as it always is. And I think you have to be unique and think of things that you can do to whether it's promoting your kids, your program. I just thought that it'd be nice to be able to link to a kid's bio where you can, look it up as it pertains to, I got to go to the,
and that's cool too.
Yeah.
But since there's the NIL part of it, the thing I can't get out of my head when I think of it is, let's just say a particular player scores a touchdown, runs over to the student section, and instead of, jumping into the crowd or something fun like that, he turns around and points at his QR code to get everybody to take a picture of it to donate $5 or whatever it may be.
And you realize that, defensive side of the ball, when they get the turnovers, they've got the, the turnover belt and things of that nature. I think it'd be, that was where you could maybe get some true opportunities if you had a QR code for the kid that got the turnover, where you could donate $5 for a turnover, or $25.
And maybe Oklahoma State will show their personalized QR code up on the Jumbotron or whatever it may be during those types of moments.
Yeah, maybe so. I like the idea of making it different. I mean, that's a pretty good idea, that if you're in a stadium with 70,000 people and they score a rushing touchdown and they put the QR codes just for all the offensive linemen up as one group, and you could donate $100 or whatever, a kid could rake in. They could rake in.
They could. I just don't see average Joe. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't feel like the average Joe is going to participate in doing this. But again, maybe that's not who they're marketing to.
Yeah. Well, again, we're speculating with that aspect of things, maybe a little bit, but these are great ideas that in this day and age of NIL, you're going to have big boosters in the stadium. what is, they may slap $1,000 down, just for the sake of doing it because they want to be, unique. But I think it's going to be really interesting this year outside of the realm of the playing on the field is that there's some things that every team is going to have to get used to. They're going to have to get used to the idea of communication devices in the helmets between the quarterbacks, the linebackers, and the sideline. So every team's got to come out of camp with a surefire way of how they're dealing with that. Because sometimes those communication devices aren't great. You can run into some problems in stadiums, especially when you have 70,000 people in there with 70,000 cell phones. So that can be a problem. The other thing is you've got the new iPad system on the sidelines, how they're going to utilize that. I do think it's a big benefit to offensive line and the coaching of the offensive line to look at plays and see what happened. Because that in itself will be big help. And so those two things to me are very interesting in the game of football this year, to see how they work, being that their first year. The 2-minute warning,
I like the 2-minute warning in college.
Yeah, I do.
They're doing that.
Yeah, the only thing with the 2-minute warning is going to be, do you take a timeout prior to the 2-minute warning so you get that extra timeout, or do you hold it? I mean, it's going to maybe redevelop the game management system that coaches have and how they're going to utilize it. But I'm with you. I do like that aspect of things. And what they've done thus far to speed some games up where you're not, wasting 4 hours because you've got, 80 commercials that you got to get through, or you're stopping the clock for anything and everything. So I like the fact that we're advancing the game. I think we've been behind it for a number of years in college football, especially because this technology is not something that just came out. I mean, this has been used in the NFL and high school football for, the last 10 years or so.
Speaking of ancient stuff, do you feel like, and I don't mean to cut you off, and if you need to finish your point, go ahead. But one thing that's always felt ancient is the fact that they still use the first down chains to, instead of something a little more kind of concrete. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Did you see what the NFL's been doing in their preseason games?
I have not. No.
Okay. The NFL is utilizing a chip in the football that they're using to mark a first down. The chains on the sideline, the chains on the sidelines are there pure visually, for players, coaches / fans. But when it comes to deciding whether it's a first down or not, they utilize the chip in the football to have an imaginable line that appears to determine if it's a first down or not, rather than having to bring the chains onto the field and decide, the stretch of the chains and all that stuff. So they probably saved themselves at least 30 seconds to at least a minute of time just to determine whether it's a first down or not, because they got this chip in the ball that now determines on the field whether or not, hey, it's first down.
I like that, because I feel like the way of pulling the chains and walking to midfield or wherever it is the ball's placed is always felt, anytime they show it, even though they're probably right a decent amount of the time, it always still just looks like incorrect, if that makes sense. It just seems like they could have been doing it a different way for all these years.
Well, there's always human error, of course.
And not that I want to remove humans from that. The AI stuff already scares me enough as it is, so I'm not for eliminating human jobs.
Yeah, right. Well, the referee has to come over and get the chains at the proper, chain link or yard line it started on, or however they look at that. But I hope in the NFL, at least, if this year it works, that we can see it throughout, the college ranks as well. Question is, will it, this chip that they're putting in there, I mean, is it free from being destroyed because of whatever reason, but I found it to be very interesting in the NFL during their preseason games and how they've utilized it when it's a very close, call. An official can't look to the sidelines and get an exact determination. He can call for this, measurement that's done in the replay booth via a chip in the ball, and they tell him yay or nay, or it's short by, a couple inches. I think it's going to speed up the game in that regard, but it also is going to eliminate this, a coach looking at it and say, that's a first down, and they go out there and it's this short, and the coach is still yelling at the official because they thought they marked it wrong. And so I do think that will be a great addition to the NFL, and hopefully if it works, and the college ranks will pick it up and we'll continue to move forward.
And earlier you were mentioning the helmet communications, and obviously a big story the last couple of years, or really I guess just last year, but it had been happening in years prior, was the sign stealing. Do you think that there will be teams who figure out how to kind of incognito hack into the other team's helmet communication without being caught?
Well, realize the NFL's been using this for probably at least 8 years or more, that they have a way that they can lock those channels down where it's not, they're not able to hack into or whatever. What's unique about it is each side of the ball, offense or defense, they have 15 seconds to get the play call in. Then it shuts off, and it's all controlled upstairs in the replay booth area, that when after that 15th second hits, they shut it off. So the communication aspect, an offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator has got to be precise in his wording, and it can't be too much, hey, if this happens or that happens, because 15 seconds will go by rather quickly. So it'll be interesting to see if they can get all that in. I don't know I'm sure there's signaling still going to be done. But what'll be interesting is, are they now going to all huddle up as opposed to be on the line of scrimmage where they called the game before?
Yeah.
Or are they going to let the quarterback be the communicator on a tempo type of thing where they're giving the information outwardly to the kids on the, his teammates out on the field? I don't know how that will all work. That'll be interesting. But the counter stylings thing hasn't gone away. Sherman Moore's waiting to hear on his penalty because he had 150 text messages that were two counter stylings that he had erased from his cell phone. And the NCAA was able to recover them before he came forward and said, yes, this is what happened. So you got Michigan and Harbaugh and what happened there. That's a first-time offense. Now the second-time offense is this deal with Connor Stalions, and it'll be interesting what may or may not happen prior to the first week of games as it pertains to Sherron Moore or any penalties that Michigan will have to potentially take for that thing with Connor Stalions. So.
Plus, you got that Netflix documentary on Connor Stalions coming up in maybe less than a week. I think it's the 27th or something like that. I mean, I don't know what's going to be in that, but that could be revealing with some things in there.
I'm fired up to see that because I want to see all the interworkings of that system and what it done. And it cost the coach at Central Michigan his job this past July because I guess he was the one that orchestrated the sideline pass for Stalions at the Central Michigan State game a year ago. So here's a guy that's been waiting to be a Division I coach, and he gets his buddy a sideline pass because they were together at Michigan or whatever, and he loses his dream job of coaching Division I football, and he'll never coach at the D1 level again, therefore, and maybe not even an NCAA. So I'm anxious to see what all comes out of that because they've got to come out with something. If they drag it on another year, it loses all its purpose.
Yes. Well, so I got one more thing for you. First of all, I appreciate the extended time you've given me today.
Oh, yeah.
I always try to let people know, hey, we'll take them 15 to 20 minutes, but whenever people want to stay, I'll take that any day of the week.
Well, you know me,
I appreciate that.
I could talk football probably for a good 2 hours if you let me, but I'll at least give you some good time to edit and cut it and do all that stuff you need to do.
Well, one more thing though, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, and I may have even asked you this previously, so forgive me if I have, but do you have any sort of realistic prediction for what Indiana's record will be at the end of the season?
Well, you know, I've landed multiple times. I think 7-5 is a good number to land on. That doesn't mean that I don't think they can be 8-4 or 6-6, because those are all within realms of possibility. But I think 7-5, based upon their schedule and their home games and things of that magnitude, I think that's a legitimate area to look at. And I do think that's reasonable when you look at everything from different viewpoints. But, you know, it's one of those things you almost put yourself in a corner when you make these predictions and such, because so many things can happen in the game of college football, and you just don't know what's going to happen with everything. I'm interested to see how they play that first week. I think that will tell us a little bit of everything, because the Western Illinois game, that game to me, I
hate having the FCS game not be the first game, because it's automatically a step down in competition no matter who you played the week before.
Well, I don't like them scheduling FCS games, and I know that
I'm ultimately with you there too.
I know they're ultimately doing it for two different things. They're getting the money to those schools that have limited budgets, because they do give them a pretty good payday. But, you know, I think if you're going to drop down, you know, like FIU, you know, that mid-major area, I think you should stay at that level, you know, and play like a Mid-American Conference team that's within your geographical footprint. I mean, you got so many schools that you could bring in just from the MAC. Now, I know that coaches will say, well, I don't want to play a MAC school because, you know, these guys are pretty good.
It's almost like your skill. It does feel like maybe Indiana specifically, outside of Ball State, I feel like Indiana is afraid to play teams in the MAC. They never schedule MAC teams.
No, I know. It's very seldom. Now, they played Akron, was it last year?
That's right. The overtime game. That's correct. I forgot about that.
Yeah. And see, that to me gave you a better picture of what Indiana was going to be like last year than playing Indiana State or Western Illinois, where you dominate it and you come out feeling good and you think you've got something better than you do. And the reality of it is you don't, because you go right against Akron then, and you know, like you said, you struggle against an Akron team that was, you know, below middle of the pack in the Mid-American Conference.
Yeah, so we'll have to see. I'm excited. Yep. Good chat with you as always. Shannon Griffith from Hoosier Tailgate. Again, you can follow him on Twitter, at Coach Griff 55. Appreciate your time, and we'll definitely do this again. I mean, the next time we'll talk will be during the season, so we'll definitely get to hear some more concrete thoughts on where this football team is at.
All right, my friend. Always willing to be on.
Appreciate it. Good stuff from Shannon Griffith. As always, appreciate his time. I feel like I've said that a bunch today, but I do appreciate him and all of the insight that he brings to the Indiana football side of things. And we're finally almost there. A lot of good things coming out of today with the Battle for Atlantis announcement, kind of solidifying the Indiana basketball non-conference schedule, and also being now just 10 days away from the beginning of Indiana football season. And also less than that for college football season in general. College football begins in 3 days now, folks. 3 days. And again, I'm going to go and pull up those matchups again, because I am going to talk a little bit about specifically some news involving one of the teams in one of those matchups here in just a moment. But just to remind you of some of the games going on this weekend, we've got Florida State, number 10 Florida State, taking on Georgia Tech in the Aer Lingus College Football Classic to kick things off at noon. Florida State currently minus 10.5. I'll try and give you all my final predictions for week 0. My betting predictions, if you will, for week 0 matchups. I don't know which games I'm going to actually bet on. I may, if I make those decisions by then, I'll let you know. But I will let you know what I would take at the very least for each of these games. But as I mentioned, number 10, Florida State taking on Georgia Tech in Ireland. I do love the Ireland game to kick off things in college football now each and every year. Aviva Stadium in Dublin. And then game 2, 4 hours later on FS1 at 4 o'clock, Montana State at New Mexico. So fun fact about this game, Montana State currently favored by 11.5 points. For those who may be unaware, Montana State is an FCS program. New Mexico is not. And they are double-digit 2-score favorites on the road at New Mexico. That's insane to me. And Montana State, I believe they were maybe 8-4, something along those lines in the FCS last year. So not a bad team at the FCS, but only the very best of the best FCS teams are generally not even favored, but they're usually the ones to pull off the upsets against FBS opponents. That's not always the case, but that's typically how it works. But this New Mexico team must be rearing for a horrible season if they are already underdogs against somebody who probably the rest of college football would be favored against, especially at home. So that may be interesting to keep an eye on just for the sake of seeing not only how bad New Mexico is, but Montana State being the FCS program favored on the road like that. It's just something you don't really expect to see a lot of. And then after that, the primetime game. Get ready for primetime college football with SMU and Nevada on CBS Sports Network. What more could you ask for, folks? I'm kidding, obviously. Just having a little fun. But SMU, one of the new teams from the ACC, formerly of the American Athletic Conference, taking on Nevada on the road. But guess what? Now, I know that these are both FBS programs, one of them formerly at the Group of 5 level, being SMU. But SMU on the road is currently 25-point favorites. It's a lot of points. It's tough to think what to bet. I hate betting on week 0. I don't know that I'm going to bet because I just don't want to lose money, man. And I'm definitely going to bet in week 1 at the very least. But betting week 0, I feel like you're just asking to lose, and I like to get off to a good start. If I do make any bets in week 1, they're most likely going to be bets that are just very easy I can maybe just get a couple of bucks off of. Like maybe I'll take Florida State. Man, heck, I don't even know if that would be a gimme. Let's say maybe just bet Florida State to win and SMU to win. And just win a few bucks off of that. Because that's not going to give you much if you just take the money line there. Taking the spread will obviously give you a little more of the good stuff. And then I don't think I can bet on that Montana State New Mexico game. That just sounds like such a wild card. And this next one is the one I was talking about, the nightcap, the midnight game, the Sickos Committee game of the week, as I've said. Maybe not on this show. Maybe I have. Again, I've said before, I forget what things I mention on certain shows sometimes. I know I mentioned it on the afternoon show yesterday. But the Sickos Committee game of the week, Delaware State traveling to Hawaii. And here's a little piece of interesting stuff from that game. Delaware State missed their flight to get out to Hawaii. And thankfully, they built in an extra travel day, supposedly, in case there were issues surrounding that. All right, we may have a bit of a little visitor here for the last part of the show. My dog, Lily, is making not really an appearance on camera, but she's back here sitting with me because we've got some pest control people who have arrived at the house. And, she's barking at them. And I can't record while she's barking. So, thankfully, me bringing her back here with me is she's being calm. And maybe removing her from the situation was a good idea. She's minding her own business right now. So glad to have her on board as again, not a guest, of course, but she's sitting in, doing a little shadowing, if you will, of In Touch with Indiana Sports. But back to what I was saying about Delaware State and Hawaii. So that's the midnight game. Hawaii minus 40-point favorites. That's gone up, by the way. That was a few points closer, if you will. But since the travel issues that I mentioned earlier, where Delaware State missed their flight, and thankfully they had an extra day built into their travel schedule, so they're not going to miss the game. But they're already, showing some issues. But Delaware State traveling to Hawaii, that is what travel, by the way, in terms of how you got to get there. You've chosen, as if you're Hawaii. So obviously Delaware State's going to get a big check for going to play this game. Delaware State is a horrendous football program, even at the FCS level. I think they went 1-10 or 1-11 last year. So this is strictly a bye game for Hawaii. Hawaii is going to pummel this team one way or another, more than likely, and give Delaware State a check to take a big L and go back home. So this is more or less a glorified vacation for the Delaware State football program. Because again, all they got to do is get there and get their check. And that's, that's good for those small programs that don't have the financial resources that the upper level programs typically do. They just take the beating, take their check, and go home. But what a story it would be if Delaware State does the unthinkable. Because Hawaii, they've had good years, but Hawaii has not been a formidable program in quite a while. So if you catch Delaware State just feeling the vibes, being excited about being in Hawaii, even though they've had some travel issues, I mean, they may have a chip on their shoulder. It's like I said with Shannon Griffith earlier. Bad teams in week 1 don't know they're bad teams yet. And so you may see some matchups be a lot closer than they're panned out to be. So I doubt I will partake in watching a lot of Delaware State and Hawaii. And honestly, with the sleep schedule that I've been on the last few weeks, I may be in bed before this game kicks off. And if you think I'm a loser because I'm going to bed before midnight and I'm in my mid-20s, well, then I'm a loser. And honestly, I don't care if you think I'm a loser or not, because I am pretty lame when it's all said and done. And I wear that as a badge of honor. It doesn't bother me. I'm very comfortable with who I am as a human being and the things I'm interested in and that type of stuff. So I don't really feel bad. And I know most of you who watch the show are fairly familiar with me anyway, at least for those of you who came from, who know me from other shows and all that type of stuff. And that's good. And I like having you guys on board and understanding me in that sense the matter. So, where do we go from here? Whew, man, let's take a big sip of coffee real quick. Enjoying that good stuff. It's funny, we're talking about Delaware State, and my coffee mug is from Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, where my wife and I went in the early summer. Delaware, by the way, if you've never been to Delaware, very, I don't want to say off the map type of place, because that's not really what it is, but it's very unthought of place to go, especially on a vacation. But it's also very nice, under the radar. That's probably the better way to say it. But a lot of good seafood. Had crab legs for the first time when I was in Delaware, and it was good stuff. So if you've never had crab legs and you find yourself in the mid-Atlantic, whether that be Delaware, Maryland, that's the place to get them. So what else? Anything else you want to get into? Fansville is back. One thing that's always cool about the beginning of college football season every year, if you're, not only a fan of watching football, you almost always see the Fansville Dr. Pepper commercials. And I feel like most of you are familiar with what it is, but if you're not, Fansville is a commercial series that they've kind of, over the years, turned into, they make it seem like it's its own TV show. And therefore, each year it's like a new season of Fansville. And so they released the trailer, if that makes sense. Or I don't know if it's the trailer or if it's like, week 1 or, episode 1, if you will, of Fansville. But they released that the other day, and it's good stuff. I like the fictional land of Fansville and all that comes with it. And if you're a fan of In Touch with Indiana Sports, I suggest you leave a like. I suggest you comment on what you liked or even what you didn't like. Subscribe on YouTube. Check out everything going on HoosierIllustrated.com, and we'll be back. Excuse me, man. Let me catch my breath real quick. Sometimes I'm doing my little monologue. Sometimes I don't realize how much air I'm pumping out here whenever I'm talking and not stopping. So got to get better at that. That's for sure. But again, follow along everything that releases on HoosierIllustrated.com. Subscribe, like, leave a message, 502-830-9195. We'll be back again on Friday to do this all again. This has been another episode of In Touch with Indiana Sports.